Awaken your spirit chosen ones. You don't wake monsters by accident. You wake them by pushing people past the point where they pretend. Here's the part nobody likes to admit out loud. Most people don't panic when you're loud, angry, or dramatic. They panic when you go quiet internally and start thinking clearly. They panic when your nervous system stops shaking, your eyes stop pleading, and your energy stops leaking explanations. That's when the room changes temperature. That's when jokes stop landing. That's when people who once felt very comfortable mistreating you suddenly develop anxiety they can't name. There's an actual psychological fact behind this. Studies on power dynamics show that people feel safest around those they believe are predictable, dependent, or emotionally reactive. The moment someone becomes emotionally self-contained, observant, and detached from approval, the brain reads them as a threat. Not because they're violent, but because they're no longer controllable. That's why calm confidence makes insecure people itch. It's not mystical, it's neurological. And once that switch flips, panic follows. What they didn't expect was that the pressure, the disrespect, the gaslighting, the endless tests, all of it, would do the opposite of what they planned. They thought they were weakening you. Instead, they trained you. They sharpened your awareness. They forced you to build an internal spine. And now, you move differently. You listen more than you speak. You notice what's not being said. You remember things people hoped you forgot. Suddenly, everyone's watching their words around you like they're reading terms and conditions out loud. And let's be honest, there's a dark humor to it. The same people who once told you to calm down are now the ones sweating when you smile and say nothing. The same ones who underestimated you are now overanalyzing your tone, your timing, your silence, your success. Congratulations. Without trying, you became the most stressful variable in their day. You don't even have to do anything dramatic. Your existence alone is now a reminder that actions have consequences, and time keeps receipts. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about aggression. This is about what happens when someone finally stops abandoning themselves. The demon they're panicking about isn't evil, loud, or reckless. It's disciplined. It's observant. It's done negotiating its worth. And the reason they're panicking is simple. They can't put you back where they found you, and they know it. Number 1. They didn't awaken anger. They awakened memory. What came alive wasn't rage, and it definitely wasn't some sudden desire to fight back. What woke up was your memory. The kind that doesn't just remember events, but remembers patterns. You didn't suddenly become emotional, you became aware. And awareness is what people fear the most, because once someone remembers clearly, they stop being easy to rewrite. For a long time, they relied on one thing, your ability to forget. Forget the disrespect, forget the shifting stories, forget how many times you were made to doubt what you clearly saw and felt. Forget how often you were told it wasn't that bad, or that you were overreacting. Forgetting kept the peace. Forgetting kept them comfortable. Forgetting kept you small. But memory doesn't disappear forever. It waits. And the moment you stopped numbing yourself, stopped explaining things away, stopped defending people who never defended you, everything started coming back. Not emotionally, but clearly. You remembered who benefited from your confusion. You remembered who stayed silent when you were mistreated. You remembered how often you were blamed for reactions that were caused by constant pressure. That's when the fear started. Because you're no longer operating from raw emotion, you're operating from recall. You're no longer reacting in real time, you're referencing history. And someone who remembers patterns can't be easily manipulated again. You're not arguing facts anymore. You're recognizing behavior. What's hunting them isn't your voice getting louder. It's your mind getting sharper. You don't confront the way you used to. You don't explain everything. You don't rush to prove your side. You simply move differently because you remember differently, and memory changes posture, it changes tolerance, it changes what you allow access to. People can sense when they've lost the advantage of confusion. They feel it when their old tactics don't land. That's why they're panicking. Not because you're angry, but because you're awake, and this time you're not forgetting a thing. Number 2, the version of you they created is gone forever. For a long time, you were surviving inside a version of yourself that was shaped by other people's expectations, limits, and comfort. That version wasn't fake, it was conditioned. It learned how to stay quiet, how to explain itself, how to shrink reactions so situations wouldn't escalate. It learned how to carry blame just to keep things moving. And the truth is, that version worked. For them. They knew how to deal with that you. They understood your triggers, your guilt, your need to be understood. They knew which buttons to press and which lines to cross because you would eventually bend, soften, or doubt yourself. That's why they're shaken now. Not because you became someone else overnight, but because the version they memorized no longer exists. You didn't announce the change. You didn't give a warning. You simply stopped responding the same way. You stopped absorbing behavior that never should have been yours to carry. You stopped explaining pain to people who benefited from misunderstanding you. And without drama, the role they assigned you expired. What makes this permanent is that you can't unknow what you now see. Once you recognize how much of yourself was built for survival rather than truth, there's no going back. That old version was born out of necessity. This one is born out of clarity, and clarity doesn't negotiate with comfort. They feel it when conversations don't go the way they used to, when guilt doesn't land, when emotional pressure gets met with calm boundaries instead of collapse. It's disorienting for people who relied on familiarity to stay in control. They're reaching for someone who isn't there anymore. And here's the part that hurts them the most. The new you isn't trying to prove anything. You're not rebelling. You're not angry. You're just unavailable to the old dynamics. That's what makes it final. The version of you they shaped served its purpose, survival. But survival is no longer the goal. Growth is. And once that shift happens, there's no reset button. Number 3, you stopped needing their approval, and that broke the hierarchy. For years, their control relied on one invisible lever: your need to be accepted, validated, or approved. Every word they said, every expectation they set, every criticism or dismissal had power because you were still subconsciously seeking their nod, their smile, their recognition. That need kept the balance tilted in their favor. You were predictable, manageable, and contained, and in that containment, they felt untouchable. Then something changed. Somewhere along the line, you stopped chasing validation. You stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. You stopped apologizing for existing on your own terms. You stopped explaining yourself to people who didn't care to understand. That simple, internal shift dismantled the structure they had built around you. You no longer moved like a person they could control. You moved like someone who didn't need permission to exist fully. The panic that follows isn't about your words or actions. It's about the recognition that their system has failed. They thought they were untouchable because they had shaped your behavior, but suddenly the system collapsed from the inside. The hierarchy that placed them above you on some invisible scale no longer exists. You occupy your space freely, and that freedom throws them off balance in ways they didn't anticipate. They notice it in small ways first: the subtle confidence in your tone, the refusal to justify yourself, the calm way you handle situations that used to make you flinch. They panic because every interaction reminds them that their influence has limits they never prepared for. The very thing they relied on to maintain order is gone. This is why they feel hunted, not because you're aggressive or loud, but because you became autonomous. They built a world where you were predictable, and when predictability vanished, the foundation cracked. And cracks are terrifying to people who believed everything depended on their control. The realization hits hard. They no longer hold sway over you, and that absence of control feels like exposure, weakness and fear all rolled into one. Number 4. They realized too late that pressure forged precision. Every moment of pressure, every manipulation, every trap they set was meant to break you. They assumed stress would bend you, mistakes would confuse you, and constant testing would make you flinch. They were wrong. What they didn't see was that each push, each attempt to destabilize you, was secretly sharpening your perception. Every unfair situation trained you to notice the patterns they thought were invisible. Every lie they told you, every contradiction they forced you to navigate, was building your internal radar. What they feared most is that you don't just react anymore. You analyze. You see intentions, motivations, and consequences before anyone else notices them. They can throw chaos at you, and instead of cracking, you map it, process it, and position yourself so that the chaos no longer has power over you. The same pressure that was meant to make you crumble is now the reason you move with precision that feels unnatural to them. They start noticing it in the little things, how calmly you respond, how carefully you choose your words, how you never let emotions control decisions. That level of control over yourself is what terrifies them because it can't be manipulated, bargained with, or forced. They underestimated how adaptability works under fire. Every time they tried to corner you, they were inadvertently teaching you efficiency, observation, and strategy. Every attempt to make you small, to make you flinch, added layers to your ability to read people and situations with accuracy. Now, nothing slips past you, and the very skill set they helped create is the thing that has them panicking. Their panic isn't coming from loud threats or dramatic confrontations. It's coming from the quiet certainty you carry. They realize their every action has already been accounted for, predicted, and nullified in ways they can't even articulate. That's the part that breaks their composure. They wanted a reaction, a stumble, a mistake. Instead, they created someone who moves like a blade, precise, calculated, and untouchable. And that realization hits them all at once, leaving them frantic in ways no shouting could ever achieve. Number 5. The demon is simply your refusal to shrink anymore. They called it a demon, but it isn't anything mystical or uncontrollable. What they're truly afraid of is you refusing to shrink to fit their expectations, their comfort, or their narratives. For years, you were contained, edited, compressed, and reshaped, so that the edges of your personality, your intelligence, and your presence didn't make them uncomfortable. They controlled how loud you could be, how visible you could be, how much of yourself you could even allow to exist. That version of you was easy to manipulate because it fit neatly into their world. Then you stopped. You stopped censoring your thoughts to avoid conflict. You stopped softening your voice to avoid criticism. You stopped apologizing for existing fully in spaces they thought you didn't belong in. The result is terrifying for them. It's not about anger. It's about presence. You occupy space unapologetically, and that space refuses to conform to the limitations they once imposed. You are no longer negotiable. You are no longer a character in the story they wrote. That refusal to shrink exposes everything they relied on. Their control, their assumptions, their ability to stay above you in their own estimation. Every attempt they make to provoke, manipulate, or intimidate now falls flat because it assumes you're still pliable. You're not. Every corner they try to box you into, every line they drew to limit you, is met with the same steady, undeniable truth. You exist on your own terms. What's hunting them isn't a supernatural force. It's the awareness that the person they thought they knew no longer exists in the form they could handle. You became uncontainable, and uncontainable people make others panic because familiarity and control no longer apply. Their strategies, their manipulations, even their fears, all collide and fail against a single, simple fact. You refuse to shrink, and you will not be reshaped for anyone again. That refusal is absolute, unrelenting, and undeniable, and it's far more terrifying to them than anything they could ever label a demon. Number 6. They can't manipulate what sees clearly. The scariest thing for someone who thrives on control isn't confrontation or rebellion. It's clarity. You see the truth now in ways they never anticipated. You notice the subtle shifts, the half-truths, the hidden motives, and the gaps in their stories. Nothing slips past you anymore. Every action they thought was invisible is now illuminated by your observation, and that visibility destroys the illusions they counted on to maintain power. Before, they could guide your reactions, twist your words, and shape your understanding of situations. They could bend reality just enough for you to question yourself, to doubt your instincts, to apologize for things that weren't your fault. But when someone starts seeing clearly, manipulation loses its foundation. Lies no longer hold weight because you don't fill in the blanks with assumptions. You don't provide the missing pieces they relied on to control the narrative. Clarity makes you untouchable in ways they can't reconcile. They panic because they feel exposed and cornered without anyone actually cornering them. The strategies they practiced over years suddenly fail. Every tactic that once pressured you now boomerangs back. Not because you're fighting, but because you simply understand. You don't argue. You don't react out of fear or guilt. You don't over-explain. You operate from observation and discernment, and those two things are more dangerous than any weapon they could wield. That's why they are terrified. Not because you're aggressive or confrontational, but because you've become the person who can see motives, patterns, and weaknesses without them ever being aware. Your awareness is silent, but absolute. It doesn't need proof, evidence, or confrontation. It just exists, and it invalidates every control tactic they thought would work. Seeing clearly is not just knowledge, it's power. And people who relied on bending your reality are suddenly powerless in ways they can feel in their stomachs but can't fix. That's the panic. That's the fear. That's why what they woke up is now hunting them, and it isn't angry, it's awake. Number 7. Your calm isn't mercy, it's calculation. What terrifies them isn't the heat of your anger or the loudness of your reactions. It's the quiet you carry, the stillness that isn't hesitation but deliberate thought. They confuse calm for weakness, for mercy, for a lack of interest. They misread your patience as forgiveness or tolerance. The truth is far sharper. Your calm is strategy. Every word you withhold, every movement you control, every measured breath is part of a calculation they cannot predict or manipulate. They panic because this calm cannot be bargained with. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't respond to provocation, and it doesn't seek revenge. It simply exists, and in its presence they feel exposed. The same people who once thought they had every advantage are now staring at someone who no longer reacts to their games the way they expect. Their patterns, their manipulations, even their threats lose weight, because calm, when it's intentional, can be stronger than any attack. The calculation isn't about waiting for the perfect moment to retaliate. It's about maintaining clarity while they scramble blindly. You're not wasting energy on proving yourself or forcing outcomes. You've recognized the terrain, mapped the intentions, and positioned yourself with precision. Every interaction becomes a reflection of their own missteps. Every miscalculation they make only confirms your awareness. They notice it in subtle ways, the measured way you respond, the patience that isn't passive, the way you let them reveal themselves without interference. They start second-guessing everything. They panic because they realize that you could act at any time. But unlike before, it would not be emotional. It would be deliberate, precise, and final, if necessary. Your calm unsettles them, because it's not temporary and it's not performative. It's evidence that you've evolved beyond their control. They once relied on reactions, arguments, and chaos to dominate. Now, nothing they do can shake your equilibrium. They're learning, too late, that real power doesn't scream. Real power observes, calculates, and waits. And that's exactly what they're facing now. Number 8. You became evidence of their failure. Every move you make now is a mirror they can't ignore. You survived their manipulation, their lies, their tests, and their attempts to control you, and in doing so, you became living proof of everything they claimed you couldn't be. You didn't just outlast them. You outgrew them in ways they didn't anticipate. Every success, every steady step, every moment of composure is a statement they can't erase. They failed. It hits harder than confrontation because it doesn't require your words. You don't have to accuse, argue, or prove yourself. The truth of their failure is embedded in your presence. When they look at you, they see all the times they underestimated you, all the moments they manipulated or gaslighted, and all the ways they assumed you would break. You're not reminding them verbally. You're existing in ways they never prepared for. That's why panic sets in. They weren't expecting accountability to come without warning, without chaos, without shouting. They weren't expecting it to arrive calmly, naturally, and inevitably. They start to notice subtle things first. The confidence you carry, the clarity in your decisions, the boundaries you uphold without explanation. It unsettles them because these are things they tried to suppress or reshape in you, but they no longer have power over them. Every reaction they attempt to provoke fails, every lie they expect to confuse you collapses, and every manipulation falls flat. You're the proof that their control mechanisms never worked, and that realization is unbearable. The deeper terror comes from understanding that this isn't temporary. You didn't stumble into awareness, and you didn't rise by accident. You became disciplined, grounded, and unshakable, which exposes their pattern of failure at every turn. You're not attacking them, you're just yourself, strong, composed, and uncontained. And every time they see you functioning on your own terms, the reality sinks in. They built a world meant to control you, and it failed spectacularly. That's the panic. That's the fear. That's why what they woke up is now hunting them, and it doesn't even have to move to be dangerous. Number 9. They're panicking because you no longer explain the truth. You embody it. For years, they depended on your need to justify, defend, and prove yourself. They counted on the fact that you would constantly explain your choices, clarify your intentions, and validate their interpretations of your actions. Every word you spoke could be twisted, every explanation could be used against you, and every attempt to prove yourself fed their illusion of control. That was their world, a world where your truth could be negotiated, challenged, and shaped to fit their comfort. Now, that world is gone. You don't explain anymore. You don't clarify. You don't justify. Your truth isn't a story to tell. It's a life you live. Your actions, your boundaries, your presence, they all communicate reality louder than any argument could. You became the embodiment of your integrity, your values, and your autonomy. And that makes them panic because it's impossible to debate, twist, or gaslight a person who lives what they believe without asking permission. They can see it in the way you carry yourself, calm, composed, deliberate. Every interaction confirms that their narrative no longer applies. You're no longer playing a role in their story, and they're realizing too late that they built their assumptions on a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. There is no argument, No explanation, no dramatic declaration that can undo this. You're not proving anything because there's nothing to prove. Your life is already speaking volumes. This embodiment of truth terrifies them because it forces accountability without confrontation. You aren't targeting them, calling them out, or demanding recognition. You simply exist, consistently and fully, in a way that highlights their own duplicity, insecurity, and failures. Every day you operate in alignment with yourself, you show them what they never could control or suppress, and that's why they panic. Not because of what you say, but because of what you are. The person they tried to manipulate, mislead, and bend has grown beyond explanations. Your truth isn't negotiable, and it doesn't need validation, and that inevitability is what hunts them now. Number 10. What's chasing them is accountability they can't outrun. They thought they could act with impunity, that their choices, lies, and manipulations would never come back to confront them. They counted on distance, distraction, and your compliance to keep their misdeeds hidden. But accountability doesn't need a schedule, a confrontation, or even your approval to arrive. It simply exists, and it finds its way to those who believe they can outrun it. That's exactly what they're facing now. Every step you take, every boundary you enforce, every moment you live fully aligned with yourself is a reminder of what they've done and how they tried to bend reality around their own convenience. You don't need to confront them to make them squirm. Your life itself has become the evidence they can't erase. And they feel it in their chest, in their conversations, in every calculation they make, that their actions, their choices, and their failures are visible whether you point them out or not. The panic isn't dramatic, it's quiet, insidious, and relentless. They know the consequences of their behavior are inevitable because the person they thought would remain malleable has refused to stay small. They know they can't argue the truth or spin a story that will undo what's already lived. The pressure of accountability is real, and it's stalking them in every glance, every memory, every interaction. You don't chase it, you embody it, and that embodiment is relentless. They start noticing how much they underestimated you, how much they relied on your compliance, and how fragile their sense of control really was. Every plan they made to dominate, manipulate, or sideline you now backfires because you operate from integrity, awareness, and self-possession. They panic not because you're angry, not because you're seeking revenge, but because their reckoning isn't coming from you. It's coming from the unshakable truth of your life, and truth never forgets, never negotiates, and never lets them hide. What hunts them now isn't noise or chaos. It's the certainty that accountability is in motion, and no amount of denial, distraction, or manipulation can outrun it. They created the conditions, and now they're trapped in the consequences they never prepared for. Number 11. They feel exposed without you saying a word, and that's new. For so long, they relied on your voice to fill gaps, to smooth over cracks, to explain, defend, and justify. Your words were their safety net. When you spoke, even to clarify, they could manipulate, misinterpret, or twist your explanations to fit their story. They counted on your willingness to mediate reality for them, to translate truth into something palatable for their comfort. That pattern kept them insulated, confident, and in control until it stopped. Now you don't speak to protect them, to justify yourself, or to explain your actions. You don't argue, you don't defend, and you don't clarify. You simply exist in your truth, and that absence of explanation exposes everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every half-truth they relied on to dominate or obscure now has nowhere to hide. Silence, in your case, isn't passivity. It's presence without compromise. And presence without compromise leaves them scrambling because the gaps they once relied on to maintain control are no longer covered. They panic because they feel every failure and every dishonesty reflected back without filter. Your lack of words doesn't mean weakness. It means boundaries, integrity, and self-possession. Every glance they exchange with you, every interaction, is now a reminder of how little power they truly have over the person they once assumed they could shape. They are forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that the narrative they depended on is gone. What terrifies them most is that this exposure doesn't require confrontation or argument. There is no explosive outburst, no dramatic revelation, just the quiet, consistent presence of someone who no longer adapts to their lies. And with each passing moment, that presence highlights their mistakes, their miscalculations, and their failures in ways words never could. This is new territory for them. They were used to control, predictability, and compliance. Now, without explanation, they feel every consequence of their actions pressing in. You became the mirror they can't avoid, the truth they can't silence, and the presence they can't manipulate. And that is why what they woke up is hunting them, quietly, relentlessly, and unshakably. Number 12. The fear isn't about revenge, it's about inevitability. They're not panicking because you're angry or plotting some dramatic retaliation. The fear that's consuming them is deeper than that. It comes from the recognition that what's happening now was always coming. It was inevitable, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. You didn't need to yell, threaten, or even move aggressively. You simply grew, evolved, and claimed your space in a way that exposed the cracks they spent years trying to hide. The inevitability of your rise is the true terror they're feeling. Every action they took to control, manipulate, or contain you only laid the groundwork for this moment. Every lie they told, every test they ran, every attempt to make you doubt yourself trained you to see clearly, to act deliberately, and to stand firm without asking for permission. You didn't seek revenge, you became inevitable. And people who live by chaos, deception, and manipulation panic when they realize the very force they tried to suppress cannot be stopped or diverted. They can sense it in small, terrifying ways. When you move through life calmly, decisively, and without apology, they feel the weight of every consequence they thought they could avoid. When they try to provoke you, you remain steady, and the power they expected to hold evaporates. They watch as the truth unfolds around them, and it doesn't matter what they say, who they threaten, or what they plan. The outcome is already written by your presence, your awareness, and your refusal to be contained. The fear of inevitability is unbearable because it strips away the illusion of control. They start to see that their influence is gone, their manipulations are transparent, and every tactic they relied on has failed. It doesn't matter how clever, persuasive, or calculated they think they are. What they created, nurtured, or underestimated has evolved beyond them, and nothing can change it. This is why they panic, not because of something you're going to do, but because of something that's already happening. Your rise, your clarity, and your unshakable presence are inevitable, and inevitability cannot be bargained with. It simply is, and they have no place to hide from it. Number 13. They created the very force that ended their influence. Every attempt they made to control you, every lie they planted, every trap they set was meant to keep you small and manageable. They thought they were molding your reactions, bending your perception, and shaping your limits. But in reality, every move they made was strengthening you in ways they never anticipated. Every manipulation they used to assert power, every bit of pressure they applied, was secretly training you to see patterns, recognize intentions, and operate from a place of precision and awareness. The more they pushed, the sharper you became. They built their own reckoning without realizing it. They thought you were fragile, pliable, and predictable. Instead, Every attempt to undermine you became a lesson in resilience. Every injustice they delivered became evidence that you needed no one's validation. Every lie they spun became material for discernment. They unknowingly handed you the tools to operate above their influence, and now those same tools are what unsettle them daily. What's terrifying to them isn't confrontation. It's the quiet fact that they were essential to creating what they can't control. You didn't stumble into power or awareness. You were shaped by their very attempts to suppress, confuse, and dominate you. And now that force they helped build exists independently of them. You act deliberately, observe consistently, and enforce boundaries without needing permission. The person they expected to manage, manipulate, and bend has evolved into something untouchable. They panic because their strategies no longer work. Every tactic they relied on is now transparent to you. Every manipulative word, every calculated action, every attempt to provoke or destabilize is anticipated and neutralized. And worst of all for them, they can trace it all back to themselves. The pressure, the chaos, and the control they applied created a version of you that they never could have predicted, but can now feel the full weight of. They are facing a force they cultivated, and they don't know how to contain it. They thought they were the creators of influence, but the truth is far more terrifying. They were the architects of their own undoing. Number 14. The hunt isn't loud, it's irreversible. What they call a demon isn't a roar, a scream, or a visible force. It's the quiet, unshakable truth of your growth, your awareness, and your refusal to bend to their design. The panic they feel doesn't come from immediate confrontation. It comes from the slow, undeniable realization that the consequences of their actions are permanent. You don't have to yell, strike, or attack for them to feel it. Your existence now, fully aligned with your own power and boundaries, is enough to make them tremble. They believed time was on their side. They assumed mistakes could be erased, wrongs could be hidden, and control could be regained. Every manipulation, every attempt to undermine you, every deception was meant to be temporary, reversible, or manageable. But they underestimated one thing: you don't forget, and you don't return to old patterns. The version of you that could be shaped and bent is gone forever. That inevitability is what terrifies them, because it proves that whatever they built to maintain dominance has failed irreversibly. Every action they try now, every strategy to regain influence, meets resistance not through force, but through your presence. You don't need to act aggressively to assert power. You simply exist as someone who cannot be rewritten, reshaped, or redirected. The impact of your growth echoes constantly, and they feel it even when you're silent. Their panic is the result of understanding that the system they relied on has collapsed, and there is no way to rebuild it. No return to the old order, no undoing the awareness they created in you by trying to suppress it. The hunt isn't dramatic. There are no explosions or confrontations. There is only the persistent pressure of consequence, the slow reckoning that they awakened a force that cannot be contained, and the realization that their influence is gone forever. You didn't chase them. You didn't attack them. You simply became permanent, immovable, and uncontainable. And that permanence is lethal in a way they cannot escape, negotiate, or reverse. That is why they panic. That is why what they woke up is now hunting them, and it is irreversible. The truth is undeniable. What they awakened wasn't chaos, anger, or recklessness. What they unleashed was the culmination of every survival instinct, every lesson learned under pressure, and every boundary you refused to compromise. They thought they could shape you, bend you, and define your limits, but every attempt only refined your vision, sharpened your awareness, and strengthened your presence. They believed in temporary control, but what they created in response to their own actions became permanent. Your calm is intentional, your clarity is unshakable, your boundaries are immovable, and your truth is embodied in every action you take. They are panicking not because of loud confrontations or dramatic displays, but because the very force they underestimated, ignored, or tried to suppress has become inevitable. You no longer explain, negotiate, or justify. You simply exist, fully aligned with yourself, and in doing so, you illuminate their failures, their insecurities, and the reality that their control is gone forever. The demon they fear isn't external. It is you, fully awake, fully aware, and uncompromising. It is the product of everything they attempted to break, every lie they told, every test they imposed, and every miscalculation they thought would hold you down. This is more than survival. It is transcendence. Every step you take now, every decision you make, and every boundary you hold is proof that manipulation, control, and deceit can only go so far. You didn't need to fight them to prove your power. You became power itself, calm, precise, undeniable, and irreversible. And that is why they are panicking. That is why the very system they relied on to dominate you is collapsing in real time. And that is why what they thought they could awaken to fear is now the thing that hunts them in ways they will never control. If you felt the weight of this truth, if you felt the clarity of what it means to be unshakable, make sure you don't let this wisdom stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that cut deep, like this one. Hit the like button to show support, comment your thoughts and experiences below so we can grow together, and share this with someone who needs to understand the power of being awake and unstoppable. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that the strongest force isn't loud, it's inevitable, and it's already in you. Stay awakened, chosen ones.